Did you know that there is a single verse in the Bible that Satan himself did everything to hide for more than 2,000 years? He does not want you to discover it either. A text so powerful that, when it was discovered by Jerome in the year 380, it left him terrified, because he realized that this simple revelation could turn any Christian into a living weapon against the forces of darkness. And what is most frightening is that over the centuries, this verse has been diluted, softened, and even distorted, precisely so that you would never have access to its true meaning. Today I will open before you the truth that the enemy worked for centuries to conceal, and you will also learn how to put it into practice so you do not fall into the traps of the enemy. If your struggle has been against lust and against temptations that seem to have no end, this may be the most important video you will ever watch in your life. If this message is already awakening something inside you, like this video and subscribe to the channel. It is your way of contributing and, at the same time, uniting with us in this spiritual battle. Have you noticed how, over the centuries, certain truths seem to have been erased, distorted, or even manipulated? This did not happen by accident. The enemy knew that if the church had clarity about some specific passages, the spiritual strength of Christians would be devastating against the kingdom of darkness. And that is exactly what happened with the verse that Jerome discovered in the 4th century of our era. When he compared the original Greek text with what was being transmitted and translated, he realized that there was a continuous effort to weaken its message. Translations such as the King James, the New International Version, and the English Standard Version not only changed words, but softened the impact that the verse should have had on the minds and hearts of the followers of Christ. It is as if something grand had been stolen from the church, removed on purpose to prevent men and women from discovering the true authority they have in Christ. Have you ever stopped to think about this? That perhaps the Bible you read every day, although precious, may have been purposely softened in some crucial points so that you would never awaken to your real identity? Write the word truth here in the comments if you believe that the church lost something essential over the centuries. I want to see how many are attentive to this spiritual theft. Now, if we look directly at the text of Luke chapter 4, verse 18, we find 3 words in the original Greek that change everything. The first is ethmelos, translated many times only as captives, but in ancient Greek it refers specifically to prisoners of war, people who were defeated and taken by the enemy. This is not a small thing, because Jesus was not speaking of just any kind of prison, but of those situations where someone feels constantly defeated, without strength to resist. The second word is aphosis, which does not mean just freedom, but the complete cancellation of a debt and the reversal of any dominion. It is as if the enemy had to return everything that he took, and was still forced to acknowledge that he lost possession of your life. And the third word, perhaps the most impactful, is tetherios manos, which describes people repeatedly defeated, crushed by the same sin, falling always at the same point of weakness. And here is the shock. Jesus was not speaking of ordinary prisoners, but of those who fought against temptations, like lust, and fell time after time. He was announcing not only freedom, but authority to transform the very area of defeat into a territory of victory. This is far too radical for the enemy to allow everyone to discover. But when we think about the actions of God, is that not exactly what he has always done? Take David as an example. He was just an inexperienced young man, but it was precisely this fragility that became his weapon against Goliath. Moses, insecure and with difficulty in speaking, became the mouth of God before Pharaoh. Paul, who carried a thorn in the flesh described in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, learned that the power of God is made perfect in weakness. Do you see the pattern? What the world calls weakness, God transforms into a platform of power. So why should you look at your struggle against lust as a weight of shame and not as a training ground? Have you ever thought that your falls, repentances, and returns to God may be shaping the type of warrior that the enemy most fears? If this word is already making sense to you, write the word strength in the comments. I want to know who understands that weakness is exactly the place where God manifests power. And there is a specific reason for all of this. The enemy does not choose targets randomly. He attacks strategically. If you read the story of Samson in Judges chapter 16, you will realize that his greatest vulnerability was in the sexual area, and it was precisely there that the Philistines set their trap. David, the same one who wrote psalms about purity and intimacy with God, fell before the desire for Bathsheba in 2 Samuel chapter 11. Paul, the apostle who most taught about spiritual warfare, spoke of an internal struggle that kept him dependent on grace. Do you see the pattern? The enemy always attacks with intensity precisely in the area that God chose to be the greatest field of ministry for a person. If you feel that lust has been a giant in your life, could it be that God has called you exactly to set others free from this prison? Have you ever thought that what most embarrasses you may be exactly the field where God will use you the most? If you have already noticed this in your own life, comment the word attention. This is the sign that you recognize that the most attacked areas may be exactly the areas of greatest purpose. And here we arrive at a crucial point. The Bible in Ephesians chapter 6 verse 12 reminds us that our struggle is not against flesh or blood, but against principalities, powers, and spiritual hosts of wickedness. In Greek, the word used for struggle is pale, which means hand-to-hand combat, a battle of proximity, not at a distance. This reveals something powerful to us. Those who have been hit by lust, those who have fallen and risen countless times, those who have fought intense battles in the field of sexuality, are not just fighting for themselves, but are gaining real experience to face these enemies up close. It is not theory, it is practice. And here arises the great difference. Those who have never faced this war may speak about purity, but those who have been on the battlefield become capable of setting others free with authority. Have you ever stopped to think that the scars you carry are exactly what make you qualified for this spiritual war? And that is why Jerome developed a practical protocol that transformed lives in his time and continues to be valid even today. For 7 days, each person who applied this process went through a spiritual revolution. On the first day, they declared their identity. I am not a victim of lust. I am a warrior in training to destroy spiritual strongholds. On the second day, they recognized their authority, understanding that each temptation was actually training to develop spiritual muscles. On the third day, they began to intercede for others who struggled with the same problem, praying not from theory, but from real experience. On the fourth day, they wrote testimonies of how God was shaping character, humility, and dependence. On the fifth day, they turned each attack into immediate intercession for another person. On the sixth day, they began to walk in authority, speaking with firmness because they knew the weight of the battle. And on the seventh day, they finally accepted the calling, declaring before God, "My struggle does not disqualify me, it prepares me." Stories of people like Mark from Texas, who stopped merely begging God and began leading a group of men in pursuit of purity, or like Sarah from Ohio, who turned her addiction into a counseling ministry for women, prove that this protocol has real and lasting fruit. And here is what most stirs the heart. The attack is not random. If you are being bombarded by lust, it is not because God has rejected you, but because the enemy fears what you will become. Each time you resist, even with difficulty, you are accumulating spiritual authority. Each time you return to God after a fall, you are gaining compassion and grace to help someone who will fall tomorrow. What Satan tried to use to destroy you, God is using to prepare you. Is that not the greatest turnaround? What seemed to be your greatest failure is, in fact, your greatest qualification. What seemed to be shame is, in fact, training for war. This should fill you with hope, because nothing in your life is wasted when you are in Christ. We have reached a decisive point of this message. Now you already understand that your struggle is not an accident, nor a meaningless weight, but a spiritual training carefully allowed to shape you as a warrior of God. The enemy tried to hide this truth for centuries, distorting translations, erasing the real meaning of the original words, and keeping Christians trapped in a cycle of guilt and shame. But today, the light of the Word has revealed that your greatest battle may be exactly your greatest weapon against the kingdom of darkness. This is not only liberating, it is transforming, because it shows that every defeat you have faced was actually preparing your spiritual authority. Now it is impossible to look at your journey in the same way. Can you feel it? The voice of God is calling you to rise up and take your true place. If this word spoke to your heart, subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and write in the comments, "I love the Bible." And get ready, because in the next video we are going to reveal something even deeper. The secret war against lust that almost all of the chosen face but no one talks about. I will see you there.